Mill gave 70K to her online doctor lover and tried to sell the family home, snarling, "He's real and we'll be rich." When we confronted her, it started with a few odd comments, then missed calls, long silences during family dinners. My wife would say, "Mom's just getting older." I wanted to believe that too, but something was off, like a quiet hum of static that never went away. Mill, my mother-in-law, had always been strong, sharp, grounded. A woman who once ran her own business, raised two daughters alone, and knew how to stretch every dollar. We admired her. We trusted her. So when she mentioned she'd met someone online, I didn't think much of it. A doctor, she said, from overseas. Humanitarian work in Laos, smart, spiritual, kind. But love, real love, doesn't demand secrecy or $70,000. And that's exactly what started disappearing. Quietly, drip by drip. At first, we thought maybe she was being generous, helping with missions, maybe. Then came the second mortgage, then the investment plans. Then she stopped answering our calls completely. We only found out what was happening when my wife noticed her childhood home listed for sale. The same home where her daughters had taken their first steps, where Mill once swore she'd die before she'd leave. She was selling it, without telling anyone, and all the money, every penny was being wired to a ghost, a man she'd never met, never spoken to beyond typed words on a screen. But to her, he was everything, her destiny, her savior, her soulmate. When we landed in Laos, desperate to bring her back to reality, we expected confusion, maybe embarrassment, maybe heartbreak. But what we got was something else entirely. She looked at us like strangers, eyes glazed, smile too wide, like something inside her had already slipped away. And when we showed her the proof, the fake photos, the scam reports, the money trail, she didn't cry. She didn't deny it. She cursed us. Not metaphorically, not in anger, a real curse. Ancient. Word for word from a language neither of us understood, until she translated slowly with venom curling from her lips. "You have interrupted a sacred path, and for that, you will lose everything you love, one by one." That was the moment I realized. We hadn't come to rescue her. We'd stepped into a war, not just for her money or her house or her sanity, but for her soul. And she had already chosen sides. The initial shock of Mill's betrayal, that gut-wrenching revelation delivered through her chilling curse, didn't just fade. It festered, twisting into a cold, hard knot of anger and disbelief in my stomach. Lina was devastated, a ghost of her usual vibrant self. For days, she'd just stare out the window, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks. How could she? My own mother, she'd whisper to the empty room, the question hanging heavy and unanswered. After everything we've done, the house, the car, the money, every month, like clockwork, did none of it mean anything? Her pain was a tangible thing, a suffocating blanket over our lives. I tried to be strong for her, but inside I was seething. This Dr. Kevin, this digital phantom, had not only swindled an elderly woman, but had also managed to poison her against her own flesh and blood, turning a mother into a spiteful stranger. The first concrete step was damage control. We knew Mill in her current state of delusion and now fueled by a twisted sense of righteousness after her curse, was a ticking time bomb. We had to move fast to protect what little was left. Lina's cousin, Noi, the one who'd first alerted us about the pawn tapestries, became our reluctant eyes and ears on the ground in Laos. Her voice was always hushed, laced with fear whenever she called. "She's changed, Lina, truly changed," Noi reported one evening, her words tumbling out in a rush. "She talks to his picture all the time, the one Kevin sent her, probably some stolen photo of a male model. She calls him my love, my savior. And the things she says about you both, terrible things. She told Auntie Kamla that you were trying to steal her inheritance from Kevin, that you were jealous of her happiness. The absurdity of it was staggering. We were the ones trying to stop her from liquidating her own and the family's assets." The tales of Mill's financial recklessness began to paint an even grimmer picture. We learned she'd already successfully pawned not just the gold jewelry and Lina's SUV, but also a 4-acre plot of ancestral land, receiving a mere $12,000 for something valued closer to $50,000. She'd even managed to get a cash advance of $20,000 against future rental income from a small shopfront she owned. Money that was meant to support her for years, now likely already wired into the scammer's bottomless pit. She'd pawned family scooters for a paltry $1,000. The total we could account for that she'd already sent to Kevin was inching closer to $50,000, and that was just what we knew. Each revelation was like another twist of the knife. Lena's father, Mill's ex-husband, a stoic and usually unflappable man, confessed to us during a late-night call, his voice cracking with emotion. I saw her talking to one of those loan sharks down by the river market. The man had eyes like a viper. She was handing him a bundle of papers, smiling, like she was making the deal of a lifetime. I tried to approach to ask what was happening, but she saw me and hurried away, actually ran from me, her own ex-husband, the father of her children. The cultural reluctance to confront, which I'd initially found frustrating, now seemed like a crippling paralysis within the family. Everyone was whispering, everyone was worried, but no one dared to take decisive public action against Mill. It would bring such shame, one uncle told me, his voice heavy with resignation, to have it known that one of our own has been so foolish, and for her to be so stubborn, so aggressive when questioned. It is not our way. But her stubbornness was escalating into something far more dangerous. We received word that she was now actively trying to sell the large family home in the capital, the one where two of her other daughters and several grandchildren lived. She'd listed it with a shady, out-of-town agent for $100,000, a property easily worth $500,000 in the bustling central business district. The sheer audacity, the callous disregard for the fact that her actions would make her own children and grandchildren homeless, was mind-boggling. This wasn't just foolishness anymore. It was a level of self-absorption so profound it bordered on sociopathic. The curse she'd thrown at us now felt less like a desperate outburst, and more like a declaration of war from someone entirely consumed by her fantasy, willing to sacrifice anyone and anything on the altar of Dr. Kevin. We knew our planned intervention had to be more than just a conversation. It had to be a siege. The dam of denial finally broke with a text message from Lina's youngest sister, Suda, who still lived with Mill, essentially becoming our unwilling informant and a prisoner in her own home. The message was a single blurry photo, sent in haste, her hand clearly trembling. A pawn ticket. Not just any pawn ticket. This one was for a significant amount of gold jewelry, pieces Lina and I had meticulously chosen and gifted Mill over the years for birthdays, anniversaries, and the traditional Lao New Year. Heirloom quality necklaces passed down from Lina's own grandmother, intricate bracelets that shimmered with tiny embedded sapphires, earrings that had framed Lina's grandmother's face on her wedding day. All gone. For what? A pittance compared to their actual and sentimental worth, a sum that would evaporate into Dr. Kevin's digital wallet within hours. Suda's accompanying text was short and terrified, each word a tiny scream for help. She said she needed it for Dr. Kevin's life-saving surgery on his fictitious son. She was crying, Lina, real tears, but her eyes, they were hard, like stone. I tried to stop her. I begged her. I reminded her of grandmother, but she looked right through me, like I wasn't even there. She just pushed me aside and walked out with the velvet box. That was it. The point of no return. The air in our pristine American living room suddenly felt thick, unbreathable. Lina stared at the photo on her phone, her face a mask of pale disbelief, her knuckles white as she gripped the device as if it were the only solid thing in a crumbling world. The silence was deafening, broken only by her ragged, shallow breathing. "At the gold," she whispered, her voice cracking, each syllable an effort. "Grandmother's wedding necklace? The one she wore when she married grandfather? She pawned grandmother's necklace for him?" It wasn't a question. It was a lament, a grief-stricken realization that Mill had crossed a line from which there might be no coming back, a desecration of memory, of family sanctity. This wasn't just about money anymore, if it ever truly had been. It was about heritage, about sacred trusts being shattered for a digital ghost, a carefully constructed lie. The image of Mill, stony-eyed and resolute, pushing past her own distraught daughter to sell off family heirlooms, painted a terrifying picture of just how deep the poison had seeped. We started making frantic calls, a desperate attempt to piece together the horrifying mosaic of Mill's deceptions before she could inflict further, irreparable damage. Each conversation added another jagged piece to the puzzle. We learned that the roughly $50,000 USD she'd already managed to acquire from pawning various items. The initial land plot that was meant for community farming, the scooters the grandkids used to zip around the village, Lina's SUV, the cash advances on rental income from a small business property she owned. And now the entirety of her gold jewelry, had already vanished into the scammer's coffers. Each transaction was a fresh stab of betrayal, a testament to her spiraling obsession. She was liquidating her life, her family's security, her children's future, for a man who likely didn't even exist beyond a stolen profile picture and a carefully crafted script of manipulation and false promises. He was a master puppeteer and Mill, his willing, tragic marionette. Then came the most chilling revelation, courtesy of a tearful, almost incoherent call from Lina's father, Mill's ex-husband, a stoic, respected man who rarely showed emotion, his voice now thick with a mixture of disbelief and rage. "She tried to sell the house in the capital," he choked out, the words tumbling over each other. "Our children's home, Lina. The place your mother grew up, the place you took your first steps. She listed it for $100,000 US. It's worth 5 times that at least, right in the heart of the central business district." He'd only found out by sheer chance. A concerned city official, a distant family friend who remembered Lina's grandparents with fondness, recognized the property listing and knew something was deeply, catastrophically wrong. He'd managed to put a temporary administrative hold on the sale, citing contested ownership due to their complex, decades-old divorce settlement, buying us precious fleeting time. "And that's not all," Lina's father continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper as if afraid the words themselves might cause further collapse. "She attempted to sell the plot of land designated for the family business, the one your uncles have been pooling their savings to develop for years, a project meant to secure all their futures. And the other 4-acre farm plot, the one I specifically earmarked for Suda's dowry, for her future security, she tried to get pennies on the dollar for it all. She told the agent she needed the money for urgent medical bills for a loved one overseas, weeping and wailing about how her children had abandoned her in her time of need. It became terrifyingly clear. Mill was on a rampage, a desperate, scorched earth campaign to funnel every last asset, every last memory, every last shred of family legacy to her spectral lover. The why was almost irrelevant now. Lost in the fog of her delusion, the how to stop her consumed our every waking moment, a frantic race against a clock we couldn't see. Lina's family, as I'd mentioned, shied away from direct confrontation. It was a cultural norm, a deep-seated reluctance to cause open conflict, to make anyone lose face, even someone actively destroying their collective lives. So, despite everyone knowing the disastrous path Mill was on, no one was stepping up to forcefully intervene. Whispers, yes. Concerned phone calls relayed through us, yes. But direct, decisive action? No. That's when I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone. The burden, the unpleasant, messy, confrontational burden, was going to fall squarely on my shoulders. I was the outsider, the farang, the one not bound by the same intricate, paralyzing cultural webs. "I'm going to Laos, Lina," I said later that night, my voice firm, betraying none of the churning fear and revulsion I felt inside. "We have to stage an intervention, a real one. No more whispers, no more hoping she'll just snap out of it. And we have to do it now, before there's nothing left to save but ashes." Lina looked at me, her eyes wide, dark pools of tears reflecting the lamplight, a mixture of abject terror and desperate, fragile relief warring on her beautiful face. What if she hates us for it, my love?" she whispered, her hand trembling in mine. "She might," I admitted, the words like stones in my mouth. "She very well might. But if we do nothing, Lina, there might not be a her left to hate us, only a hollow shell dancing to a scammer's tune." The 3 weeks leading up to our flight to Laos were a maelstrom of frantic, late-night planning sessions, fueled by stale coffee and mounting anxiety. My days became a complicated dance between my actual job and the shadow role of crisis manager for a family imploding oceans away. I was on countless crackling international calls with Lina's increasingly distressed father, with her terrified younger sister Suda, and with a rotating cast of uncles, aunts, and village officials, each conversation adding another layer to the complex, culturally sensitive intervention strategy we were trying to cobble together. We learned that Mill, likely sensing the net tightening around her spectral romance, had become even more paranoid and dangerously unpredictable. She'd stopped going to the local market entirely, a place where she once thrived on gossip and social interaction. Now, she relied on Suda for every single thing, from groceries to fetching water, yet treated her youngest daughter with open suspicion, frequently accusing her of spying for Lina and me, of trying to sabotage her happiness with Kevin. Suda, poor girl, sounded perpetually exhausted and on the verge of tears every time we spoke. She counts the money in her purse a dozen times a day, brother, Suda told me one night, her voice barely a whisper over a crackling, insecure line terrified Mill might overhear. And the pawn tickets. She hides them in different places every single night. Sometimes under her mattress, sometimes tucked inside the old rice jar. She screamed at me yesterday, accused me of trying to steal from her when I was just sweeping the floor near where she'd hidden them. She said Kevin warned her about thieves in the family. The insidious poison of the scammer was not just stealing money, it was shredding the very fabric of trust between mother and child. Our most immediate, practical goal was to prevent further hemorrhaging of assets. We managed, through a series of delicate, persuasive conversations led by Lina's father and a now surprisingly resolute Suda, to discreetly talk to the key village officials. These were men of standing, who understood the gravity of the situation and the deep shame it brought upon a respected local family. They agreed with solemn nods and hushed promises to create significant bureaucratic delays and complications should Mill try to force through the sale of the remaining key properties, specifically the main house in the capital where her daughters lived, the second larger farm plot, and the parcel of land designated for the long-planned family business. It was a temporary fix, a fragile dam built of whispers and unofficial agreements against a raging flood of delusion, but it bought us precious time. We then made a difficult, calculated decision. We would pay off the loan on Lina's car immediately upon our arrival. It was a smaller, more manageable amount, and retrieving the car itself would at least prevent that tangible asset from being lost forever. We could then sell it locally in Laos and use those funds, potentially supplemented by our own savings, to try and reclaim the first pawned farm plot. But those loan sharks, as everyone in the village called them with a mixture of fear and contempt, were notorious. Without Mill's willing cooperation to retrieve the original loan documents, that land was likely gone for good. The hardest, most gut-wrenching decision was to completely stop sending Mill her monthly allowance. Lina agonized over it for days, the guilt eating at her. "She'll have nothing. How will she eat?" she'd cried. "She's my mother." "She has a roof, Suda's there, and we will ensure she doesn't starve," I reassured her. We arranged for her utility bills to be paid directly, and started sending money to Suda specifically for groceries, with strict instructions that the food be put directly into Mill's fridge. We couldn't risk Mill getting her hands on cash. It would be siphoned off to Kevin before the day was out. The most pressing existential concern, however, remained the large family house Mill was actively trying to sell, the one in the capital. It wasn't just her house, it was a multi-generational home. Two of her other daughters, besides Suda, lived there semi-permanently, along with, quite often, one or two of her young grandchildren. Losing that house wouldn't just affect Mill, it would render a significant portion of her immediate family homeless. The stakes were impossibly high. I spent sleepless nights researching interventions, reading first-person accounts from families who'd been through similar hells. The concept of victim impact statements seemed crucial. We asked key family members, her stoic brothers, her bewildered daughters, even her normally reticent ex-husband, to write down in their own words how Mill's actions had affected them. The letters, when they started arriving, were heartbreaking. Her oldest brother wrote of the shame. Suda wrote of the constant fear. Lina, in a letter stained with tears, wrote about the agonizing loss of the mother she once knew. We planned to read these aloud, hoping the collective weight of their grief might finally break through. We also decided controversially that upon our arrival, we would take Mill's smartphone, her lifeline to Kevin, and replace it with a basic Nokia, cutting off her direct line to her tormentor. The discussions about the intervention itself were fraught. "What if she refuses?" Lina asked, her voice small. "What if she walks out?" I didn't have easy answers. "We might have to physically prevent her from leaving," I said grimly, "for a few days, until she understands." The thought of essentially holding her captive felt monstrous, but the alternative, letting her sell them all into ruin, was unthinkable. This intervention had to work. If it didn't, if she remained lost, we would have no choice but to cut her off completely. My own family's financial future was also on the line. I couldn't justify bankrupting us for someone who refused to see reality. The weight of it all was crushing. The flight to Laos was a descent into escalating dread. Lina was a fragile shadow of herself, her usual optimism extinguished. Mill had vanished from her city home. A reluctant friend confirmed our fears. Mill was attending a funeral, a transparent lie. "The country farmhouse," Lina whispered, her face ashen. "She's hiding." Our planned 10-person intervention team dwindled to 6 core members. Lina, her 2 stoic brothers, her brave younger sister Suda, and me. The remote farmhouse met us with shuttered windows and an ominous silence. Suda's calls of, "May? Mother?" were met with a muffled, paranoid shriek, "Go away! Kevin warned me you'd try to hurt me!" We surrounded the house. "Ha, Mill," I yelled. "We're talking today, one way or another." Her eldest brother, his patience gone, roared, "Open this door, or we break it down!" The main door was crudely barricaded from within. The other, though locked, looked less formidable. A rusty crowbar from the van became our key. The ancient wood groaned, then splintered, but Mill had been busy. Twisted coat hangers, dozens of them, formed a surprisingly strong metal net around the doorknob, anchored to heavy furniture. 10 minutes of brutal, sweating effort, and we finally burst in. The main room was dim, suffocatingly stuffy, reeking of stale incense and raw fear. Empty. She'd retreated to the bedroom, her last fortress. As we started on that door, her screams erupted. Wild, terrified accusations of murder and theft, desperate pleas to her phantom Kevin. It was chilling. The door cracked, then gave way, revealing Mill cowering in the far corner, a disheveled, almost feral figure amidst a shocking tableau of chaos. Papers, strange protective charms, and half-packed bags were strewn everywhere. Her oldest brother, his face a mask of anguish, approached slowly, hands raised. "May, we're not here to hurt you." His reward was a vicious punch to the arm, a spat-out curse. I sat on a dusty trunk, the air thick with her delusion, and began the grim task of dismantling her fantasy. Armed with screenshots and irrefutable logic, I calmly, meticulously laid out the classic predatory romance scam script. The initial flattery, the relentless grooming, the impossible declarations of love. I detailed the package stuck in customs needing fees, the business trip gone wrong, leading to a fictitious arrest, the escalating desperate pleas for bail money, always tied to shimmering promises of an idyllic life together in America once. Kevin was free and his non-existent millions were unfrozen. "Why, Mill," I pressed gently but firmly, "can't this supposedly successful American doctor call his own embassy? Why does he only need your money, sent through untraceable wire transfers to anonymous entities? Why do his stories constantly change? His emergencies always coincide with when you receive your allowance or pawn another heirloom." She remained silent for what felt like an eternity, just staring, though a flicker of something, confusion? Dawning doubt, occasionally disturbed the terrifying blankness in her eyes. The others took turns, their voices raw with emotion. Suda, weeping openly, read her victim impact statement, a heartbreaking litany of a daughter's stolen peace and a mother's terrifying transformation. Lina, her face tear-streaked but her voice surprisingly strong, spoke of her boundless, unconditional love, her crushing fear for her mother's well-being, the beautiful, close-knit family Mill was systematically, cruelly tearing apart with her. Inexplicable obsession for a man she'd never met. Her brothers, their voices hoarse with a mixture of righteous anger and profound sorrow, spoke of tradition, of family honor, of the deep, unbearable shame and public disgrace this was bringing upon their name, upon the sacred memory of their ancestors. 5 exhausting, emotionally draining, soul-destroying hours crawled by, each minute an eternity of pleading, reasoning, and heartbreak. Everyone was physically and mentally spent, teetering on the very verge of utter, hopeless despair. The air in that tiny, stuffy, oppressive room was thick with unspoken grief, with shattered hopes, with the bitter, acrid taste of impending, irreversible defeat. Then, just as I felt the last dregs of my own carefully hoarded resolve beginning to crumble into dust, just as I was about to signal to the others that perhaps, tragically, it was a lost cause, that Mill was too far gone, something shifted, subtly, almost imperceptibly. I don't know what it was. Maybe the sheer, unyielding, undeniable weight of our collective grief and palpable love. Maybe a tiny, miraculous crack finally appearing in the formidable, inches-thick wall of her delusion. A chink of light in her self-imposed paranoid darkness. I knelt in front of her then, disregarding the dirt, the pervasive chaos of the room, and took her rough, trembling, work-worn hands in mine. They were icy cold, lifeless. "Mill," I said, my own voice raw, with an emotion I couldn't quite name. A desperate, final plea from the very core of my being. We are your family, your blood, your children. This Kevin, he isn't real. He's a lie, a cruel phantom. The love you feel, the future you imagine with him. It's all a carefully woven, utterly false, calculated deception, designed by a heartless predator to steal from you, to isolate you, to ultimately destroy you. We are here, right now, all of us, because we love you, Mill, and we simply can't bear to stand by silently and watch you destroy yourself and everything you should hold dear, everything our family has worked for generations to build. And then, the dam finally, irrevocably, spectacularly broke. A violent, convulsive shudder ran through her frail, aging body. A choked, strangled, inhuman sob escaped her lips, then another and another, louder, more desperate, until she was weeping uncontrollably, great gasping, body-racking cries that seemed to tear from the very depths of her tortured, tormented soul. I I believed him, she wailed, her voice a shattered remnant of its former self, collapsing forward, her head falling heavily against Lena's welcoming shoulder as Lina rushed to embrace her, tears streaming down her own grief-stricken face. He sounded so real, so kind. He said he loved me. He promised me. He promised me everything. Everyone in that small, suffocating room was crying then, a messy, chaotic, profoundly cathartic outpouring of months, perhaps even years, of pent-up pain, unspoken fear, and ultimately, a fragile, uncertain, desperate relief. Awkward, unaccustomed, yet profoundly meaningful hugs were exchanged. A rare, almost shocking display of raw, unfiltered emotion in this normally reserved and stoic family. For a moment, a single, fragile, beautiful, precarious moment, suspended precariously in time, it felt like we had her back. It felt like, against all odds, against all reason, I'd actually done it. We'd won. We'd saved her, that fragile piece at the farmhouse. A mirage. Days later, Mill, despite her tearful confessions, was back on a secret phone, whispering sweet nothings to Kevin. The discovery felt like a final, brutal betrayal. When confronted, she didn't crumble. Instead, with chilling deliberation, she walked outside, lit incense, and began chanting, her voice low and guttural, waving smoking sticks at our windows. Suda, watching on a security feed, whispered in horror, "She's cursing you, wishing evil upon you both." That was it. The end. We salvaged what property we could. Lina sold her car, our wedding jewelry, just to buy back a fraction of what was lost. Titles were changed, barricades erected against further financial ruin. Mill was cut off. Completely. She has nothing left to pawn, yet the delusion clings to her like a shroud. Last we heard, she was a ghost of her former self, begging for rice, still whispering of her phantom lover. The baby blessing we'd planned, the joyful purpose of our trip, never happened. Too much darkness. Maybe one day when Kevin finally vanishes, she'll wake up. But we won't be there. Our door, like our hearts to her, is now sealed shut.